Nearby, the Living Seas is the most recent pavilion to open at Epcot. The guests take a ride downwards to a simulated undersea base, which is the largest saltwater aquarium in the world. The divers are zoologists, working with another local area network of personal computers. The research here is focused on the dolphins.
This is the dolphin's Sperry computer. It has a file-keeping system that we keep on a little floppy disk here. And every time we do a training session with the dolphins, they learn certain behaviors. They are rated on all the things that they learn. It's like going to school and getting grades. And we keep track of their grades and their records on the computer. So we know if the dolphin is progressing. We also keep track of all their blood results. Like when you go to the doctor and he takes a blood sample from you, there are certain things that are analyzed, and we put that information for the dolphins right in the computer, and we can track their hormones. We can tell when they're sick or fighting an infection. We can tell when they're real healthy, which is usually the case. And in fact, some of the things that they're learning are to help us. They'll actually give us their tail so we can take a blood sample and then put those records into the computer.
What's that like?
What's that microphone for? That's a good question. It's the operator microphone. We can talk to the dolphins. If we want to talk to them directly underwater, we can patch in. We would go to the dolphin's speaker. That would be the underwater speaker. And we would turn on the operator microphone. And the dolphins can hear me. Good girl. Okay, why don't you take those fish and just feed her, start with the end of that.
So, the PCs are mainly used for data analysis and control. But the dolphins are intelligent creatures, and the trainers are even experimenting with ways of allowing them to control their own environment.
We have the hydrophone, which picks up the dolphins' noises, and the dolphins will eventually become computer programmers through that hydrophone. They'll make noises. The voice recognition system in the computer will hear those noises, and then based on the noise that it hears, it'll turn on an environmental event. So let's say Katie goes squeak, squeak, and the hose will come on. After a couple of times going squeak, squeak, hose, it's going to begin to click. Gee, every time I make this noise, this thing happens.
They've also made a simple input device for the dolphins.
It has suction cups, so it can be put down underwater and stick on to different things. Then on the other side, they have buttons that they can push, and it fits a lot better than keyboards. They can't type on a keyboard, so they just push those buttons.
Would you rather have them use the keyboard or sound?
Well, I think we'd rather them use the sound to contact the computer because the noises that they make are more natural to them than pushing buttons. It would be a lot easier for you to talk verbally to your computer than it would be for you to type. And the same for them. And in designing computers, you have to make them dolphin friendly.
Mentioned publishing, and for most people, this is the image that comes to mind. Until recently, this is the kind of machinery you'd need to get a decently printed page. The page is created by photographing what you want to print and etching it onto a metal sheet. In fact, rather like this one, which is then wrapped around the cylinder in here. I'll just spin this around, and we'll see the cylinder. There it comes, and indeed, that is the metal sheet. Now, the cylinder itself is inked by these rollers, and the image is transferred via this rubber-covered drum down onto the paper. Now, believe it or not, this is the easiest part of publishing. The real time waster is creating the original piece of paper to be photographed. By the time you've worked out what you want and where to put it, then you've made a few changes, given it to the printers, checked it, rechecked it, probably changed your mind, you might have lost 3 months. But there was no alternative if you wanted to get something better than typewritten. And then about 3 years ago, Apple's laser printer changed all that. Take a look at the quality of this compared with the sort of thing you used to be able to get with the typewriters or impact printers. Now, a typewriter or a daisy wheel printer can only print characters, letters and numbers. A dot matrix can print pictures and plenty of different typefaces or fonts, but not very well, always a rather speckled appearance. The laser printer, on the other hand, gives you high-quality pictures and any number of fonts because it has 90,000 dots to the square inch. So, when Apple connected the laser printer to their notoriously friendly Macintosh, they had the beginnings of something really big: desktop publishing. Now, desktop publishing is a combination of the hardware and the software, in this case PageMaker, which lets you produce professional quality print at a fraction of the cost and time involved in the traditional methods. You've always been able to draw and write, of course, on the Mac, but the PageMaker software allows you to take the articles and the diagrams and arrange them as you wish in a page format. For example, here is a representation of what we've got on the page, but I've decided I want to put in this extra bit of text here. Well, couldn't be easier. I simply, I'll move this out of the way to make room for it. I do that simply by clicking on with the mouse. Now I'll move this text down to the bottom. That's very straightforward. Put that there. And I'll put in my extra text. Now, of course, that doesn't leave room for the graph, not as it stands, but I can move it around a bit. Let's pop the graph up there. Of course, it's the wrong shape at the moment, but it's no problem just to click onto the mouse and alter the format of that graph to fit the hole. And there it is, totally new format. So I've changed the format, but equally I could change the font, the type size and so on. And I print out only when I'm totally happy.
Of course, there were computers in publishing before, but Apple produced a compact system at a fraction of the price, and it didn't take long for others to follow. What was a simple new idea turned into a 1987 money spinner? Well, Graham Hallett is a leading commentator on desktop publishing industry. Graham, if I went out to buy a system today, how would I know what to choose?
Well, it depends what work you're intending to do, Mac. Frankly, if you're a marketeer or a creative designer, the graphical environment that's represented by the Apple Macintosh here is absolutely ideal. Let me give you some examples of the sort of work that can be done. An internal company newspaper, for example.
You'd never dream that was done on PageMaker, would you?
I think
not.
not.
So much like a real newspaper.
A similar speciality publication. This one is actually oriented towards script writers, authors, journalists.
That looks a bit more like what I'd expect.
Still quite high quality.
It is very good quality, yes.
This actually is a software manual, the nature of which is the text actually is going to be changing quite a lot through the content of the book, and there's quite a lot of graphics involved.
But again,
in
it's
that.
done page by page rather than as a book or chapter.
It is.
Yes.
And of course, in the company, there are the traditional overhead presentation foils, which of course these days can be made very graphical, very attractive, very easy.
And of course a lot cheaper than doing them on slides and so on.
A lot quicker too.
Yes, and you're able to change them, of course.
Yes.
Well, let's have a look at it.
Right. This is a very simple job that I'm going to work on here, a reply paid card. First of all, I'm going to be working here on what I call the master page, where we actually set items of style which are going to recur through the document. The next page of it, in fact, is the back side, which the post office will see. Here's the finished job. And if we actually look at how easy it is, at this point I can't move the master items. They're style items which are fixed, but my specifics here to make a complementary ticket are just gatherable and assemblable like this.
And if you're doing a large number of those, you wouldn't do them on your own laser printer, you do the master and then send them off to be
Because
printed.
this typically will be a mailing job, and we'd be wanting to print 500, 1,000, shall we say, and no better way than to the instant printer.
Well, the Mac's been around with that sort of software for some time now.
Yes.
Let's have a look at what's available on the IBM systems or their compatibles.
Right. Oldest PageMaker, the program we just saw, of course, is now available on IBM-type systems. But this is a fairly professional configuration that we have right here. The compact Despro 386, a very fast processor, a professional-sized screen. And in fact, this is a different package called the Xerox Ventura Publisher, which is more oriented towards longer document production, such as a book. This is a 250-page book, in which the style is going to be fairly constant throughout the publication.
And any changes you want, you must run from page to page right throughout any chapter.
Yes, and it works very, very effectively, as you'll see. This is a document of about 15 pages, as you'll see if we flick to page the next page, we have the odd bit of graphic in it. If I click to the end of the document, see how quickly we process through the 15 pages.
I might say at this point that in fact it's a very high resolution screen,
yes,
and there is no flicker whatsoever, but at home on your television screen you do see a certain amount of flickering.
Yes. Notice here at the end of the document that the two columns are balanced, although we've come to the end of the document. But let's go back to the beginning and make a few modifications. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a frame in here for a diagram. And notice how the frame is created and the text has flowed around it. I want to pick that up. If I move the frame, notice it moves the flowing changes as well. That's pretty unrealistic. There we go. Let's actually put a graphic in it now. That diagram there.
And that's a lens of a camera you've put in there.
I think so, yes. I'm pretty happy with that, but I think aesthetically I would rather position it to the edge of the text, and possibly to fit the aesthetics of the columnar structure. Sorry, I missed. There we go. Now, just to see what effect that's had at the end of the document, let's flick to the end, because inserting that diagram, of course, means that the end of the document has gone, still is balanced, but is right now down at the bottom of the page.
That's great.
Very quick.
It is. Graham, we'll come back to you in a moment.
Thank you.
Looks very straightforward, but there are two major disadvantages to desktop publishing. For one thing, the software is powerful, sophisticated, and all the rest of it, but it has no concept of what's easy on the eye. And it's no good having professional quality print, but a totally amateurish design. Here, for example, somebody has got a bit too excited about the number of typefaces available, and the result is muddled and ugly, and that's not just a case of personal preference. It's actually more difficult to get information from a jumble like this. So, although you can plan and rearrange your work on the computer, there is a school of thought that says you should still think first and create a few thumbnail sketches to get the feel of what you want the finished product to look at. There are a few roughs that somebody's been trying out, a few alternative ideas. Now, the other problem is the false sense of security you get from the friendly software and, dare I say it, the beautifully produced manuals. Now, they're all very glamorous and impressive, but sometimes less helpful than they look. At one point in this book, it tells you to look up editing a layout, but the index at the back offers you nothing under editing, and nor even under layout, editing. Very confusing, very difficult for a new user. In fact, we tried an experiment at Digby Stuart College in Roehampton. We lent them a system for a month to see how well newcomers would cope with learning to use this sort of software. Well, some prospective users took one look and refused to touch the equipment, but those who did have a go agreed that it took time just to understand what was possible, let alone how to do it. Here are some of their offerings, and here's the art lecturer who did rather an attractive self-portrait. Here it is. That was done using a mouse, very good. So, to get the best out of the system, it seems that you'll need some help or even a course.
Well, it does seem like the old story. The more function they put in, the longer it takes to actually learn how to use them properly. Graham, what do these systems cost, roughly?
Well, the Apple Macintosh configuration that we saw first, complete with laser writer and software, is around the £8,000 mark. A comparable IBM configuration, I'd say, would be just a little over 10,000, and a really quite professional system, such as this, is probably going to be 12 plus.
But that includes the laser printer as well?
Yes.
Yes. How much does that cost?
Somewhere between as little as 3,000 and 5,000.
Uh-huh. But also you've got a page print cost in that, haven't you?
Yes, you have. The cost of consumables effectively is it, and one can reckon, generally speaking, about 3p a page.
So that's why for large runs you have to do them in another way.
Yes.
Now, how do you justify having a laser printer?
Well, in the days of networks, of course, although that is quite an expensive cost, if a group of 3, 6, 10 users, which is perfectly practical, can share one laser printer, then frankly you're in the sort of region per workstation of a dot matrix printer.
And different groups can actually use it?
Yes, and I think that's a very important factor about desktop publishing, that it is really a work group activity. By the nature of things, some people are very good at creating words, some are better at graphics, and then of course you have the people who are good at design and actually laying out a page and finishing the product.
Thank you very much, Graham.
Well, for all their virtues, laser printers can't rival the conventional printing press, not for economy on long runs. But last year, Mitsubishi announced this new paper, which can be printed on by the desktop publishing system via this image processor, which costs £10,000 or so. The new paper will take ink in the same way as a metal plate, so you can wrap this around the roller of a bog-standard printing press and print up to 5,000 copies of excellent quality. In fact, some big businesses are finding it financially viable to buy the whole kit and keep all their publishing in-house.
So that's it for this week. Next week, we prove you're never too young to take up computing. And Leslie flies to Miami as part of her look at how they use computers in British Airways. So until then, goodbye.